Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. We are going to continue our talk on methods and approaches. Actually, today's session is about approaches and we are going to begin with one approach that is also known as a social approach. And of course, I'm talking about the communicative language teaching. This is also known as the communicative approach or as the CLT, the communicative language teaching. Let's start with the first thing. It means different things to different people. That means that over the years, since the 60s and the 70s when this approach was first used, there have been many authors and people discussing this approach, and there have been many different conceptions about this approach. Some people even know it as an extended family of approaches, the communicative approach, because inside one approach we can find disagreements, wars, love. Uh, by the end, there's this phrase that I really liked that says, "No one is willing to assert that they do not belong to the family." This phrase was said by Noonan, which is an Australian linguist, very famous all over the world, especially because he has dedicated his life, his entire career, to doing research about teaching English as a foreign language, as a second language. And he has very interesting texts about teaching English. This is what he said: everyone actually is interested in being part of this family, which is called the communicative approach. So let's go back in time to the 70s. During this time, teachers all over the world, language teachers all over the world, were very concerned and focusing their classes into people or students communicating by using functions that people performed with language. That means that we were not only concerned with communication, but how people used those communicative functions to use when they were speaking the language. That means that if students were involved in meaning focused tasks, then language will take care of itself. That is a premise that is very, how to say it? It's kind of, I don't know, extreme, I think. Um, I mean, if I, as a teacher, plan tasks that are meaningful for my students, that means that I don't really have to pay attention to vocabulary or structure or listening. I mean, it is important, yes, we know it, but by planning meaningful activities, my students are going to learn the language. That sounds good, right? It's actually, I was thinking that it's like when you go to a different country and you learn the language by just living in the city where they speak the language. So, of course, all activities that you perform when you are living abroad, which is also called an immersion, all the activities that you do, of course, they are meaningful because, I mean, you either perform the activities or you just die, right? So you go to the supermarket, you buy your groceries, you communicate with people on the supermarket because it's necessary that you do so. Or if you take I don't know, if you catch a bus, for example, it's also as important or as meaningful as it is to go to the supermarket. So it's more of it, I mean, it's not that I don't completely disagree with it, but I'm not so sure how language is going to appear. It's going to be learned by students. Of course, let's remember that many of us, probably most of us, we were taught English using this approach. Um, When I start to describe some of these activities, probably you're going to recognize some of your classes. I mean, I have told you previously, the communicative approach is still used in many language classrooms all over the world, not only in Mexico. Um, I think, however, it's one of the most important approaches ever because it has influenced today's newest approach, which we will be discussing next class. And of course, the invention of this approach, the proposal of this approach, meant a lot to linguists, but also to language teachers. It changed a bunch of things. Remember when we were seeing the audiolingual approach, when we were checking the grammar-based method. So all of those methods and approaches from the past obviously helped the communicative approach to be what it is or what it was in the past. So that's something really important. Then, in order for the communicative approach to work, we have to expose students plentiful exposure to language as well as plenty of opportunities to use language. So, of course, what is this called? Oh, I forgot the word. It's a very technical word. Input. The input that we had to use inside our classrooms, it had to be a lot of input, so probably videos, songs, books, magazines, a lot of input. But not only the materials that we brought to class, we also, using those materials, we have to give the students the opportunity to use language based on the materials that we brought to class. Talking about materials, also, probably you can remember from your English classes in the past, teachers brought um, materials that were very real. For example, we had what is called realia, remember? Sorry, realia. So all those objects that are used in our daily lives and they were brought to the classroom so we could create real or realistic communication. So, for example, if you asked your students to create a dialogue in an airport, you could bring to the classroom probably airplane tickets, or you could bring, probably if you ask them to create a dialogue in a cafeteria, in a coffee shop, you could bring some cups, probably, or even some real beverages. I don't know. I mean, it was really, really, really important. So, if we planned realistic activities using realistic communication, we were expecting that our students performed successfully a communicative task with accuracy. So we would have, as I was telling you, examples like creating a scene at an airport or simulating a TV program. It was very common to create like dialogues, which were also called role play, remember? So imagine that you are in a restaurant. One of you is a waitress or the waiter, and the other is a client. Maybe a third person will be another client, blah blah blah. So you remember those types of activities. By creating these realistic scenarios, teachers were trying that students communicated with accuracy in a real way, because it was like pretending to be in the place, in the country. So this obviously for our processes, it would be helpful for all of us. Of course, that characteristic besides realistic communication, performing communicative tasks, another characteristic that was very important was that students have to have a real desire to communicate something. I mean, um, on the contrary from like more traditional activities where the teacher was guiding all the activity, teaching all the necessary language and everything that the student needed to perform an activity. In the communicative approach, we would only receive like a situation. Students would receive situations like contextualization. You are at an airport and you have to buy a ticket to go to London. So go ahead, create everything. So by not limiting students to teach exactly the language that they needed or the structures that they needed, this way we would give them more creativity. We would allow them to be a little bit more free, to perform more freely, and this will help also communication to be more meaningful for them. So, okay, the teacher asked me to create a dialogue, and I am in an airport and I have to buy an airplane ticket to London. So of course I have this desire to communicate. In this case, I want to buy an airplane ticket. Also, another example is like make a point, buy an airplane ticket, write a letter, etc. Okay. Now, in the communicative approach, grammar is not the most important element, but content is. Content is very, very, very important. In this case, again, you are in an airplane, sorry, you are in an airport, so all the vocabulary that is useful for me, I have to figure it out. I have to do a research in order for me to know the vocabulary that I need, and not only but also the grammar. Remember the structures are very important. So grammar is not being taught, but it's like the cause. It's like the cause of me creating a dialogue. While students are performing the activity, like in this case a dialogue, teachers don't intervene to stop the activity because fluency is the most important in the communicative approach. The most the goal, the main goal of the communicative approach is to communicate, like orally. So you just want to give your students enough um, confidence on themselves, and you just want them to feel comfortable and okay by speaking. So you just let them speak even if they make some mistakes. As a teacher, you just make your notes while they are performing the activity, and by the end of the activity you just communicate the mistakes and what they can improve, and you just don't intervene because when you are speaking and people intervene, sometimes it causes frustration, or if it is a mistake and the teacher is pointing it out, it causes embarrassment and negative feelings. So you just don't want that in the communicative approach. As I was telling you, the materials attempt to replicate real communication by using realia. However, these materials do not dictate the language form to use. Probably, and I wrote this example because that was the one that I could remember. Probably you know it, probably you don't, but there are some worksheets that we use in English classes that have the title "Have you ever?" And then students have to go around and make small interviews or questions to the classmates. And we have a list of activities. Have you ever? And then it says, ride a camel, travel to England, eat, I don't know, eat worms. So what they have to do is that they have to change the verb to the third form, which is the past participle. So we practice the form have you ever with the past participle in order to talk about our personal and life experiences. I don't know, probably you have done it, probably you haven't, but it's a very common activity. That kind of task, have you ever, limits students a lot because they cannot ask other questions. They are going to receive the same answers like yes, I have, no, I haven't. So if students answer yes, I have, they have to talk about the experience over and over and over again because all students interview all the students. So all the students are like answering the same questions and asking the same questions, and they are listening to the same experiences. So it's very repetitive but very limiting. So what I mean by this example is that you limit the students by dictating the language form they have to use. In this case, have you ever plus participle. Instead of giving them this task, you just ask them, right? Like, pretend you are in a coffee shop and you find a person who is a foreign, and you start talking to this person and you have to communicate with him or her, and you have to ask them questions about his or her experiences. So students, instead of just limiting themselves to using the questions from the worksheet, they have to come up with their own questions, what they are interested on knowing about this person that they find in a coffee shop. Okay? There's a myth. There's a myth involving the communicative approach, and it says that grammar is no longer taught explicitly, causing students loss in accuracy. I mean, it is not taught explicitly, yes. However, that doesn't mean that it is not taught. It is taught, let's say, like not very openly, but the opposite. If I am writing my questions to this foreigner, like returning to my example in the coffee shop, if I'm thinking about the questions that I would like to ask to this, I don't know, Indian man, of course that I think of the structure that I have to use. If I want to talk about experiences, well, I just think like, what tense should I use? Maybe I go and ask the teacher, maybe I go and do a research, or maybe I go and ask a classmate. What tense should I use if I want to ask about experiences? And probably the answer is going to be present perfect. Okay? Present perfect simple, by the way. So that means that I'm going to be using the present perfect. Probably I know it, probably I don't, but I can do a research and use it, you know? This way, I'm learning about grammar, in this case, a specific structure, and I'm also using this grammar in a meaningful task and where I perform an activity, okay? Well, here's a video that I would like you to watch. Watch it until minute 10. I think it's like 18 minutes long. Please watch it because we can see the examples or an example on how we use the communicative approach. Now, the next topic is the newest approaches. These approaches are like the very last ones that were proposed. And I really like, by the way, I really like the task-based learning, which is TBL, or it's also called the task-based instruction, okay? You can find it like using both terms. The whole purpose of this approach is that students perform meaningful tasks. So maybe you are asking yourself, and what's the difference with the communicative approach? Because in the communicative approach, the main goal was to communicate using meaningful language, right? Well, in this case, the communicative approach is more interested on communication, uh, but in the task-based, we are more concerned on the tasks that students are going to be performing. That's like the objective, to plan good tasks so students can produce the language, use the language, and understand the language. It has this premise. If students are focused on the repetition of a task, they are just as likely to learn language as they are focusing on language forms. Very similar to the communicative approach, right? Anyways, instead of grammar focusing just like on the communicative approach, students receive a task to perform or problem to solve. This approach was invented when we started to think that by giving students, not only language students, but education in general, students in general, by giving students problems where they had to apply the knowledge and solve that problem, it was believed that students learned more easily and more. And it's true if you think about it, because instead of just supposing or making the students imagine situations or scenarios, you just give them a real problem, a real life problem, and they have to solve it. But in comparison to the communicative approach, for example, you just tell them, create a dialogue, you are in an airport and you have to buy an airplane ticket to London. Instead, in the task-based learning, you create the whole task. So here's the thing. Instead of just telling them like create this dialogue with these characteristics, you just tell them, okay, here's the thing. You are Mexican, so you are tourists. Um, you're tourists in France, and you are very interested in going to London to just visit the city, to get to know the city. The problem is that you don't speak French, okay? You just speak English and you are in France. Here's the problem. You don't speak the language and you have to buy a ticket. So what kind of language would you use in order to ask for help from others? You have to ask for help, but you also need to buy the ticket. So you just give them these tasks or these problems, and they have to solve it and they have to perform the task. Whoops. Yes. Okay. Now, another difference with the communicative approach is this model, this framework that we have created by Willis in 1996. In 1994, Willis said that the task-based learning was like a sort of PPP upside down. Remember PPP, we have presentation first, practice then, and presentation, practice, and production in the end, right? So instead of having this order, we just have to turn it completely around, and now we have the task-based learning. So in other words, students are given a task to perform, and only when the task has been completed does the teacher discuss the language used, making corrections and adjustments. So this is another big difference with the communicative approach, because the communicative approach, with the use of grammar, we use the grammar when we were performing some tasks, and that's it. We have to ask as students, or we have to figure things out. Now, on the other hand, in the task-based learning, we have, again, just like in the communicative approach, we have to figure things out, we have to do research, we have to work on the language structures and vocabulary, and by the end of performing that task, teacher would come to us and would tell us what was wrong. Okay, what was wrong and what needed to be figured out. I'm looking for my cell phone because I have some notes on my cell phone. I cannot pause this video, but just give me 2 minutes while I look for my cell phone. I'm back. by the way. Okay, I have some notes over here that I want to read for you. Like using this example of this model, as you can see, we have pre-task, which also says introduction to topic and task. Then we have the task cycle, which says task, planning, report. And then we have language focus, which is analysis and practice. So let me read this for you. In the pre-task stage, which is this one, the first one, the teacher explores the topic with the class and may highlight useful words and phrases, helping students to understand the task instructions. The students may hear a recording of other people doing the same task, for example. So over here, it's like the input, right? The input stage where they receive information that can be useful for them to perform the task. But also, the pre-task, it's like some sort of a stimulus for students, contextualization on what they are going to be working on. Okay? Now, the second one, the task cycle. During the task cycle stage, the students perform the task in pairs or small groups, while the teacher monitors from a distance. I think that most of you as students, you really like working in groups. In my case, I am a big fan of students working in groups or pairs, small groups, by the way. I don't like big groups. When I say small groups, I say 3 people, maximum 4. I really like it because the students can socialize, they can help each other, they can also learn from others' experiences and knowledge. And by the end, we have a really nice result, a really nice product, which in this case is the performance of the task, right? Um, hmm. Okay, so the teacher monitors from distance how students are working in pairs or groups, and the students then plan how they will tell the rest of the class what they did and how it went. Like they have to present the task in front of the group, right? Then they report on the task either orally or writing and or compare notes on what has happened. Yeah, so if the task was write a letter, like a complaining letter, they have to write the letter and then they just, by the end of the task cycle, they report how they went. Um, they also perform the task and yeah, they present it to the whole group and the teacher. Then, by the end, which says the end of this framework, which is language focus, it says, in the language focus stage, the students examine and discuss specific features of any listening or reading text which they have looked at for the task, and or the teacher may conduct some form of practice of specific language features which the task has provoked. In this case would be the analysis, right? One of the examples, blah blah blah. No, this is a different information. So you see that the practice from the PPP is by the end. You see the practice in this case of the structure, the practice of the vocabulary scene. So it's very important in this case the analysis, because when you encourage students to analyze information in the language they are learning, you are involving them into the whole class, the topic. It's meaningful for them. I would really encourage you to make them analyze information all the time. Otherwise, I mean, it becomes boring and they don't have to do anything because information is there, teacher explains everything. They just have to go there, listen, and that's it. Take notes. Just make sure that they have a more active role in your classrooms. Now, some critics about this approach suggest that while it may be highly appropriate to base some learning on task, It would be unsound to make tasks the basis for an entire pedagogical methodology. So basically, the criticism focuses on how this is like they cannot imagine a whole course or semester that goes only with the planning performance of tasks. It's very, very innovative if you think about it, because we no longer have our traditional classes where we present the topics and the students make notes, ask questions, then they practice, and then they produce the language. That's very, very, very traditional. So, yeah, it sounds challenging, innovative, um, but I'm not sure. I kind of agree with this criticism because I cannot imagine a whole course just like doing and performing tasks. It's kind of weird if you think about it. In the end, it is clear that having students performing meaning related tasks is good for language processing. Like what I was telling you, if you make them use the language that is meaningful for them, they are going to process language like more easily, they are going to remember more easily, and they are going to produce the language more successfully. Yeah, because you give them opportunities for trying out language. I would invite you to watch this video completely. It's only like 8 or 10 minutes long. They give us an example on how to use the task-based learning. I would highly recommend it to you. Finally, we have the lexical approach, which was developed in the 90s. The lexical approach, as the word says, is focused on vocabulary. Okay, so basically we have this premise: language consists not of traditional grammar and vocabulary, but often of multi-word prefabricated chunks. You know, these chunks, um, these phrases that we memorize, like in the first classes when we are learning a language, like for example, how are you? See you later. You must be joking. My name is, I am, etc., etc., right? So all these collocations, idioms, or fixed or semi-fixed phrases, all of these are also called as chunks. Okay. So by using these phrases, basically this approach is proposing that by using these phrases, students can learn a language. Huh. Interesting, right? They say that fluency is a result of acquisition of a large store of these prefabricated items, which are available for any linguistic novelty or creativity. So if you know these chunks, it gives you the opportunity to become fluent more easily, but also it gives you the chance to create more phrases because these are fixed phrases or semi-fixed phrases, you know. Like for example, if I say, you must be joking, joking can be changed to you must be using your phone, right? You must be, I don't know, you must be having lunch, you know? So you give them, the students, the chance to create their own phrases. And by creating their own phrases, it is meaningful, but not only, it is also um, adapted. It is adapted to their needs. And for the processes of learning, it's more successful using um, these strategies. Now, by focusing on the lexical characteristics, which is the words, this will move us away from concentrating on syntax or tense usage. So, of course, we no longer focus on grammar. Grammar is not important. It is essential, yes, but not the most important. So, instead of teaching syntax or tenses, we use phrases, we teach phrases such as I'll give you a ring, I'll be in touch, I'll see what I can do, I'll be back in a minute. It's just to teach the use of will, you know? Instead of using will is used for this, and this. And you use it like this, like this, like this. Instead of dictating the rules, you just teach them the phrases, like very common phrases like these ones, and students can pick up the language. For example, this is a typical example of the lexical approach. It says exercise. Sorry, not an example. Exercise. Example exercise. Rearrange these to make fixed expressions with the verb get. So look at this. Look at the first one. Things much can't worse get. So of course you have to order these words and create a sentence, a phrase. Things can't get much worse, right? The second one, what we two there are supposed time get. What time are we supposed to get there? Question, right? So all of these six phrases that are in this order, they have one thing in common. We have that we use the verb get, you see? So using these examples, we are learning phrases using get. We are kind of understanding how to use get, and you just give them the chance, you give the students the chance to create more phrases. Mhm. Now there is a problem. What order should I teach the phrases? Like should I teach first the phrases using will, or should I teach first the phrases using get? This is a problem with the lexical approach, that they don't give you suggestions on what sentences, what phrases to teach first, what specific order to follow. It's like very free. And there are some people that are very creative, and okay, that's good. There are some people like me that prefer something that is more structured. I mean, yes, it can give me ideas. However, just like the task-based learning, I cannot imagine a whole course only using the lexical approach. That's from my point of view. Anyways, that is it for today. I hope that the information was clear. I'm going to post the the two example videos that I suggested, and that's it. I hope that everything is clear. Make sure that you leave your comment over here with your full name, your shift, morning shift, afternoon shift, and make sure that even if you have questions, you can post them on the comment section. Thank you very much. See you soon and take care.